You ever have that feeling, that itch to play something from your past? That warm feeling as you remember the younger days and having so much fun with them? Maybe it was over a long past relative's house or during a certain birthday or holiday. I'm sure as gamers, we all have that. But that little itch can work against you. And soon you'll be finding yourself playing the game and scratching your head, wondering where all the fun went. Well, that's the case for today's review. This is Croc, Legend of the Gobbos, for the Sony PlayStation. Croc is a 1997 platformer released by Argonaut Software, a company mostly known for co-developing Super Nintendo Star Fox and creating the Super FX hardware that the game is known for. After Star Fox's success, the people at Argonauts wanted to develop a 3D platformer with the concept of it being called Yoshi Racing, and were looking for a mashup between Super Mario World and Mario Kart. After pitching the prototype and being initially enthusiastic about the project, Nintendo ultimately decided to reject their proposal, and with the cancellation of the almost completed Star Fox 2, Argonauts decided to end their relationship with Nintendo. After passing the pitch around to several would-be buyers, they eventually landed on Fox Interactive for the promise that they would turn the would-be Croc into a multimedia franchise, and not because they have the word Fox in the title. The story of how Croc would come to be is a lot more interesting than the actual game itself, but I guess I'm putting the Croc before the horse. As stated before, Croc, Legend of the Gobbos is an early 3D platformer. In other words, it's a late 90s, early 2000s platformer. Anyone who has even a middling understanding of gaming will know what that means. I guess I should explain just in case. These type of games usually are bright and colorful, featuring an animal protagonist of some kind, usually little on story, and are collectathons. The 1990s were absolutely littered with them. Argonauts made several other games past Croc that people my age might have heard of, or even consider them some of their favorites, like iNinja, Bug Bumble, the game that people might know more for its theme song more than the game itself, and their final game Malice, that they released not soon after before closing their doors in 2004. We begin the story with an in-game cutscene. Most game cutscenes around this era will usually be pre-rendered, but having the character models play this out is a little neat. Anyway, what's being told here is simple. Croc is an orphan crocodile that washes up on the shores of Gobbos Valley and was found by its king, Rufus. See, he has a little crown and everything. Although suspicious at first, he takes him in and decides to teach him the way of the Gobbos, in a admittedly pretty cute and charming montage. One day, some kind of evil wizard that goes by the name Dante and his minions invade the valley and quickly start capturing the Gobbos. While still having a chance, Rufus summons a bird named Beanie to quickly take Croc away from the chaos before the king is taken himself. It's up to Croc to travel throughout the valley, rescuing wayward and captured Gobbos and defeating Baron Dante. So yeah, it's your typical early platformer storyline. It tells you everything you need to do, it's completely serviceable. It tells you what you need to do, get you along your way, and to give you some motivation to actually play through the game. So harmless. The levels of Croc are split into 5 total worlds, with the first 4 having 6 levels, 2 bosses, and 2 secret levels within. In each of the game's levels, you are given the option of collecting the 6 hidden Gobbos, 5 of which are scattered across various puzzles, cages, and boxes, and the last one being locked away behind a special door that will need the use of 5 hidden colored crystals in order to unlock in each level. As you can see from the gameplay, Croc is rocking the tank controls. This is a year after Mario 64, so it's before the industry got the full memo on what somewhat competent 3D movement is like. Despite popular belief, tank controls aren't the death sentence for platformers as people make them out to be. The control scheme is fine if the game is designed well behind it. Demon Turf is a fairly recent release that kinda rocks them. But what instantly comes to mind when I think about Croc is the classic Tomb Raider series, and that's what I would describe the controls here. But the issue is that they missed the core reason as to why Tomb Raider controls work. You see, Tomb Raider uses an invisible grid system that helps guide Laura around. That enables her to make tight, precise movements with this kind of control. Croc seems to be more fixated on putting the player in a free movement 3D world before anything else, so the game controls suffer greatly from this. Man, I don't know if anyone would think I'm exaggerating when I say this, but the only thing Croc can do without the game turning into parallel parking is running forward. Every other movement option Croc takes in this game is frustrating. No matter what you want Croc to do, you'll never be really comfortable with how he gets it done. Whether it's turning in these fat ass U-shapes or these tiny little shimmies he does with the L1 and R1 buttons, it always feels like you're wearing the wrong pair of shoes or socks. And while you can get used to it, it never really goes away. It's like he's drunk. And that's the best analogy I can give for the controls. Tomb Raider while under the influence. The fun doesn't stop there, however, because the camera system is the biggest enabler I've ever seen. The camera's mission in this game is to stay behind Croc, always. And given props, it does its job, but maybe a little too well. Much like the controls, the camera can be gotten used to, but it's never comfortable. Much of the time, it's always hung up on level geometry, stay there for a moment, while Croc runs off for a bit until freeing itself to catch up. While certainly not always the case, the camera will absolutely kill your visibility and depth perception by putting itself right above your head when you need to look forward, which leads to a ton of cheap deaths and hits. And while you can somewhat control the altitude of the camera with the L2 and R2 buttons, jumping also helps kind of orient it. You will rarely get to see what you need to see at a critical moment. The controls aren't very good is what I'm trying to say here. I have big hands, and every time I lose a life, for some reason I blame myself, and it has me feeling like the goddamn rock biter from the Never-Ending Story.
They look like big, good, strong hands, don't they? I always thought that's what they were.
I've always played this game with digital controls just for that reason. I just find the game way too unwieldy to play with the analog stick. But I gave it another shot, and I came upon something of an epiphany. This might come off as a little random and rambly, but just bear with me for a moment. I'm actually beginning to think the game kinda tricks you into the mindset of it having tank controls. With the camera always locked from behind, it certainly does give the sensation, for lack of a better term, of tank controls. But I noticed that Croc doesn't turn when pressing left and right unless you feather the button. And that's the way I'm always used to playing, that's just the way I did. Pressing the buttons fully will have Croc try to run in that direction. So since the camera is the way it is, other than moving backwards, the game might have full analog movement. It finally clicked when I was playing the boss and I noticed the camera wasn't behind Croc and he was running unimpeded in full 3D movement. I think the closest comparison would be normal piloting controls and then switch into all range mode in Star Fox 64. I don't know if that's accurate, it's just what instantly comes to mind. I played this game a good number of times throughout my life. I mean, never as an adult, but this has never entered my mind. But I guess since I'm looking at it at a more analytical way now, it finally dawns on me. Sorry if this came off a bit confusing, but the TLDR is that Croc is a seemingly hybrid of tank and analog controls. Everything I said about them still absolutely rings true. I just thought I'd share some of my strange self-discovery. Someone who is more knowledgeable on the subject might be able to explain it better. But look, strange tangents aside, mostly I've been shitting on this game for the whole video, and I do like it despite what I'm going to say or what was already said. So let's focus on some good things. Ignoring the fact that the camera and controls aren't exactly up to code, I do believe the First World does a fantastic job at making the levels nice and open, giving the player a chance to come to terms with them. And these levels will quickly tell you that Croc isn't Crash Bandicoot. He's not designed to blast through these areas with the greatest of ease. You're going to have to take your time and sometimes plot out these jumping challenges. And I know I spent the better part of 5 minutes crying about them and will never say they're perfectly fine, even if somebody gives me a reasonable explanation as to why the controls are the way they are. But for what they are, they're entirely workable. They fall in line with what the game expects from the player. I still don't like them, and never will, but it's far from the worst controlling game on the PlayStation. Moving away from the controls, this game is all about platforms. There's a platform, there's another, here's a moving one. This one breaks. You can stare at this one. You get the point. It's a regular platform bargain sale, and for what it's worth, this game does a really good job at introducing a platforming gimmick, getting the player used to it, and then introducing it in harder and harder scenarios. These mostly just end up changing the amount of time you're allowed to stay on the platform, but it's something. Speaking of platforms, I guess we should talk about the game's level design. It's okay. That's it. Just okay. Which I guess is still a positive, somewhat, because it's not outright bad or anything. Levels are separated into several rooms that each have their own little challenge to overcome, from moving a platform over hazardous terrain to actually porting you into a swimming section, but most of the time, there's some kind of platforming challenge. Which, yeah, it isn't a bad thing, it is a platformer after all, but Croc doesn't do much else. There's a lot of repeated platform jumping, like you have to make the same 5 to 7 jumps on the same looking platform, which can get repetitive, but the game does have other stage gimmicks to mix things up. Monkey bars, jello trampolines, and balloon rides are all on the table, and a whole bunch of other things to help break for the monotony of jumping on tiny platforms. On that subject, I guess we should return to these occasional swimming sections. These are kind of rare, and maybe that's for the best because the controls here are indeed bad. Swimming feels too slippery and Croc doesn't rotate responsibly, so you'll be overshooting the turn you want to make, or if you want to grab an item, you'll be making 2 or 3 laps around it before you can actually grab it. Plus there's a whole ass underwater boss, which is a hella frustrating ordeal, at least for me. Which brings us to the actual conversation about the boss fights. Each world has 2 bosses, one halfway through and one at the end, and they're the same thing. Croc runs in a circle around them as they do their attacks and leaves themselves open for a tail slap, foot stomp, or both. Croc has a stubby reach on his tail slap, so you'll most likely be smashing into them while trying to do so. Mostly because there's no real damage feedback on these things, but since Croc collects gems throughout the levels and loses them like Sonic, you'll have a chance to recover some of them. But Croc does back up like an 18-wheeler, so you'll only be able to recover 2 or 3 at a time. These boss fights just kind of end awkwardly. One moment they'll be doing their pattern, the next moment you'll hit them, and since there's no real damage feedback, the fight just kind of stops. It's weird, it's almost like their hearts gave out, and then Croc just sits there and is like,
I won!
Boss fights might be the worst thing about this game. Strange placement of eyeballs aside, Croc Legend of the Gobbos just looks okay for me. Very plain Jane in this department. At face value, the graphics are very bright, colorful, and cute, and you can clearly tell that Croc is a crocodile. But everything else just looks like characters from Fraggle Rock and it all kind of blends together. Imp guy, balls with eyes, slightly taller imp guy. Nothing here is awful looking, not by any means. And I can see how some people can think that this game is above average looking, but I don't see it, man. The art design of the worlds are very much the same department. It's all very harmless but boring. You got your grassland, your desert, your snow level, and then castle. So it's very Mario theming, because it probably used to be a Yoshi game at first. But it's fine, it's nothing bad, just boring. I think the PS1's jaggy, texture warping nature does a lot of the heavy lifting for the graphics for me. I love that look. And it keeps me from calling the game a completely lost cause when it comes to graphics. It certainly looks better than the PC version. Jesus Christ, it looks like someone traced over that with a watermarker. So Croc's been pretty meh so far, right? Right. But the one thing this game does amazingly well is the soundtrack. I don't think it's an understatement to assume that there is not a single bad track in this game. If there was anything helping me along and giving me the strength to continue this game, it was the music. Some of the best stuff on a console. Highly recommend a listen. Nostalgia has a hell of an effect on people, doesn't it? Here I am thinking Croc Legend of the Gobbos was this awesome platformer from my past, but it ended up just being okay to shockingly dull. It has nothing you haven't seen before, and the only thing the game has really going for it is cuteness and music. I have a feeling Croc wants to be this quirky girl next door game, but it ain't Donna Pizziotti, Topanga Lewis, or even Jesse Spano. Anyway, Croc has a great personality, but sometimes that's just not enough. Go get your butt dead, Croc. The game seemingly has a HD remaster coming soon, but who asked for Croc to be remastered? Not me, says I. See you next time on Nostalgia-tards.
Fuxan. What? Fuxan, do you know any sailors? Sailors? No, I don't.